Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by me. I'm in this episode. I do apologize for the apparent marbles I have in my mouth the entire episode. Episode 359, AI Apocalypse, the past, present, and future of software.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. You heard him like 2 seconds ago, but you're going to hear him again. I'm here with Todd Werth.
What? Oh my gosh, it's Todd Werth.
Oh my gosh, it's Todd Werth. That's right.
3 people in the world are now cheering.
We'll go with that. Todd, I'm sure our listeners already know who you are, but introduce yourself anyway in case people have not been blessed with the knowledge of Todd Werth.
I like that. My name is Todd Werth. You hear me at the beginning of every podcast saying, well, not everyone. Jed does half of them. I do half of them. But I do the intro, and I also edit the podcast. So, yeah, that's what I do. What I do other than that is I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Infinite Red.
He doesn't like it when we say he's the CEO because then he knows people think he does something.
No, I don't like that. When people ask me what I do, I say I'm a software engineer because any schmuck can be a CEO.
Yeah, Infinite Red is really well run, guys. We have a really strong and capable leadership team. We also have a lot of fun.
Yes, we have fun. Todd's rule is if it's funny or fun, it's okay. Actually, that might get me canceled. So that is Robin's rule. Once again, Robin's rule is if it's funny or fun, it's okay. I don't personally believe in that, but you know.
No, definitely not.
Yes.
All right. We have a really fun, I think it's fun, episode for you today. But I'm not going to tell you what it is until I've told you who is sponsoring it, which is, of course, Infinite Red.
Oh, God, not these people again. Jeez.
Infinite Red is a premier React Native consultancy located fully remote all over the place. Like we're in like half the states at this point in the United States. And we're 30 senior plus level React Native developers and support staff like Todd and myself. And we've been doing this for over a decade now. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next project, hit us up at infinite.red/radio. And mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. All right. What are we talking about today? I think it's what everybody's talking about today and yesterday and tomorrow, which is AI.
AI.
It has infiltrated our lives as software engineers, and so we're going to talk about it.
Cool.
We brought on Todd because he's been a software engineer for a really long time. He's seasoned, as they'd say.
I was building projects when Robin was sticking dirt in her mouth and her mom had to slap it out of her hand.
I don't think that ever actually happened.
I started about 2 years ago.
Oh, Todd and I have a great relationship. He's right, though. I was born in 1990. And what year did you start programming, Todd?
Okay, so actually that's not true then. I started programming probably in 1981, on my Commodore 64, which is a funny story.
So I didn't even exist. I like to tell Todd that a lot to remind him that he's old.
I started professionally programming in 1994 or 5. Yeah. And then I moved to San Francisco in 1996, and that's when it really kicked off.
What kind of programming were you doing in 1996?
At that time, I was doing... So my original programming language was Pascal, and at that time there was a Turbo Pascal, but unfortunately I didn't get a job doing that. So I was doing a lot of Visual Basic at that time. And also doing stuff in other things like Fox Pro, Microsoft Access, that kind of stuff.
What kinds of software were you building with it?
So originally, so I grew up in Reno, Nevada, which is the other city in Nevada that no one's heard of. I now live in Las Vegas, the city in Nevada everyone's heard of. And I actually did hardware in Nevada. So I did network stuff, installed networks, installed servers, that kind of stuff, workstations all over northern Nevada and California. I drove around and did this kind of work. And I did a little programming at that job. But when I moved to San Francisco, I actually got a job at a place that did both programming and network stuff. And they hired me for the network stuff. So in 2.5 years at that company, that first company, I left a senior software engineer. So I was taught by many people, including my good friend Vasily Pomalov. So what I did is we were a small consultancy, and at that time nothing was remote. Of course, it's 1996, 97, early 19.
Right, the internet didn't really.
The internet
It existed, but it wasn't. Capable of supporting remote work.
Yeah, so we did do remote in a sense. We used something called PC Anywhere or something like that, where we could control a machine over a modem. And so we would install that in the server room of some of our clients so we could jump on real quick. But mostly that wasn't necessary because I worked in downtown San Francisco if you're familiar with San Francisco, in FIDI, or the financial district, at 8 California Street, in case you're really curious.
I'm Googling that address right now, by the way.
So all of our clients were actually in the buildings around us within a few blocks. So if we were meeting with them to work on their software or going to fix something, I would literally go down our elevator, cross the street, and go up another elevator. So it was all very in person, and it did a lot of internal stuff for companies. That's to answer your long answer to a simple question. I did a lot of internal software for other companies.
Right. What we think now of as SaaS, software as a service, where it's
that didn't exist. Yeah, you either had custom software, and most companies did, even smaller companies, or you bought enterprise software, which just meant IBM or and then more.
Was Microsoft Office Suite?
Microsoft was getting into the space at that time. So Microsoft was Windows and Office, but the networking and stuff was done on things like Novell or Unix systems or AS400 from IBM. Now, Microsoft over that decade really pushed into all those and kind of pushed it out. Little aside, the reason that they kind of won is because Microsoft NT servers could run applications, and Novell servers share files and share printers, which in early 90s is all you would do. But you could actually run programs, and then they had Visual Basic, they had SQL Server, then they had .NET, and more towards 2001.
But companies were not, at that point, not trying to make money by building software. They were building software to make them more productive at whatever they were actually doing.
The only companies making software to sell it were, they were Microsoft, Adobe, Borland in the programming sphere, that kind of stuff. And these typically either were sold in a box at a store, or they're enterprise stuff where you paid ridiculous amount of money and people came in and installed it for you.
Side note, I remember vividly going to Fry's Electronics with my dad as a kid and coming home with 3 boxes, software in a box, games or whatever, computer games. Mm-hmm. And it was a box that you bought at the store and you brought home and you put, it was a floppy disk or something.
So back then, if most companies had custom software because that's the only way you could automate stuff. And there was a lot of people like us. And Visual Basic, this is actually apropos to our discussion about AI, because there's some similarities. And I think AI is going to create this class of programmers that I'm about to describe, not to skip ahead, but
spoiler alert, Todd.
But at that time, most companies, I'm talking companies with 30 people, and it didn't have to be big companies, would have some sort of custom software, either using some pre-built thing like, say, Microsoft Access or Fox Pro, which Microsoft bought later and destroyed to favor Access. But it was a much nicer version of Access with a real programming language. But I digress. So if it was a smaller company, they would probably work off something like Access, which gives you your database and gives you form making and all that kind of stuff. It's not pseudo programming, let's say. But as you got bigger in companies, then you would VB would be a good thing against either some sort of back-end database. Like you could use Access's database, which is called Jet, or you could use something like SQL Server, or you could use Oracle, some sort of data store, and then you would be building desktop apps that employees would run on their computer and access their company's database.
Which, coincidentally enough, was actually my first introduction to programming. Was at my first company, which is a paper mill.
Mm-hmm.
I helped build a I think it was T-SQL, like app for the planners to like run on demand to calculate the production like demands for the box plant or something.
T-SQL was Microsoft's version of SQL.
Mm-hmm. So it was like a stored procedure with T-SQL that powered this like.
You know what's funny is like database stuff was so like I haven't even thought about databases in a long time. Obviously, all of our applications that we build at Infinite Red have databases that they're attached to, whether it's Firebase or some sort of, but like just, we don't think about it. I mean,
it's so like the actual SQL is so abstracted for us by now.
Yeah, it's like so funny because we used to spend a lot of time writing stored procedures in SQL. Anyways, so why I think this is relevant to, if I may, Robin, AI is, I do think AI on the bottom end is I think software is going to explode on the bottom end. What I mean by that is when SaaS came along, it kind of destroyed those kind of VB developers and that kind of stuff because most stuff was serviced by SaaS, and a small company of 30, 100 people, whatever, could pay a SaaS company and get their product. I mean, Slack or whatever, their CMS, customer management system, and whatever. I think AI, because, agentic coding and stuff is going to do a lot of this stuff. I think it'll get to a situation where a farm in Ohio, decent sized farm, not a big corporation, but like a family farm, they'll need some sort of service and, some sort of software to do something in their business. And their niece will be pretty proficient with technology, and they'll just have her do it. And it will be fine because the agent will write most of the code. She'll be technical enough to figure out hurdles like how do you get it off of localhost and stuff like that. The most important part is she and her family will have deep, intimate knowledge of the business, which is probably really important. So I can see that kind of cottage industry of small software coming back just because, kind of like VB did. That's just a prediction. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. We're all wondering. But I think we're going to see an explosion of lower experienced people building software for companies.
Or just for individuals, too.
Yeah, for individuals, too. So
it opens the door for, truly, bespoke software that does something really specific and niche.
Yeah. And a lot of software...
Person or business needs.
People say, well, there's SaaS for that, and SaaS will still exist, and SaaS will blah, blah. Sure. But SaaS is actually a lot more expensive now than people realize. The costs have creeped up year after year. We're not a big company. We're 30. We say in our ad 30 people. I think we're actually 33, but it depends how you count. We're not a big company, but our SaaS bill is like $10,000 a month. We pay for SaaS. Right. So it's a non-trivial amount of money. And frankly, we often use a few features. So I envision a world where someone who's doesn't have a lot of experience, the software only has to service 30 people or 33, right? So it's not like it needs scalability. It doesn't need security because no one knows about the software and it's all internal. So, whatever. And I think that's something you would get a SaaS for. You can just extract those few features in that SaaS into your own bespoke software and save quite a bit of money. I mean, if it costs you $5,000 to pay some individual a week's worth of work to build software, now obviously that's lower cost than us senior software engineers and stuff. But that's on the other end. That's on the high end. It could actually save you quite a bit of money, and SaaS is just not as affordable these days as it used to be. You've
played around with Claude and some of these other agentic tools. What kinds of stuff are you able to build? What's been your experience with what it can do, and how easily people will be able to build this kind of sort of off the cuff software?
I think this is going to be. I mean, there's stuff like Replit and stuff that makes it even easier. I think this is going to be pretty easy for technical-minded junior, people to come in and do this kind of software. Just like kind of like when I started in Visual Basic, there was a lot of people who came into Visual Basic who did not come from computer science backgrounds. I mean, I programmed since I was 11 or 12, but that was always, privately. And then later I transitioned into real programming, I'm using quotation marks, but like, because Visual Basic didn't even have things like classes and stuff. And then you start getting into bigger systems. Now, ask your question again. I'm so sorry.
The agentic coding platforms that we're seeing today, Claude,
Oh,
Cursor,
yes,
et cetera,
yes.
like,
Yeah.
what kinds of things have you played with, and like, what kinds of things can they do, and how well will they work building this bespoke software?
Yeah, so I've been doing nothing but reading about, using, studying, figuring out the business of AI for the last so many months, just because it's changed in our industry, and my job is to make sure that Infinite Red lasts for as long as it should, with a bunch of happy developers and myself happy as well. So I spend a lot of time doing this. I do everything from actual work I need to do during the day. I'll program something that helps me with that, or I might use Cowork or something like that in Claude to automate something. I created this AAA award-winning game called Flappy Todd, which is Flappy Bird but with Todd. And
I have played it so much, and it is really addicting.
So, it's one of those things I always thought would be funny, because it's kind of like got all these internal company memes and stuff as you flap around with little Flappy Todd's little flappy arms. And I had thought about that game for a long time, and I never did, because it's just, I'm not going to spend that much time on something that, we're just using internally, right? But over a 4-day period, and most of that was me doing graphics and game testing, I was able to build it, which is kind of insane, to be honest, because it's a lot more complex than Flappy Bird. Flappy Bird is really simple, but everything I build. I don't do client work, obviously. I don't know if that's obvious or not. It's obvious to me because, well, I live in my body every day. But I don't do client work and stuff. So like Jamin and Robin are really trying to figure out how we're gonna approach a lot of the stuff we've done historically in this new paradigm. But yeah, I do tons of stuff. I'm constantly testing local models. We have different people here who have kind of different interest in AI, and they explore that and share with the team. Jamin and Robin do different things. I tend to focus on a few things. One is obviously coding with Claude, but I also focus on local models. It's not ready for us to use in any kind of real sense, but I spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff. Diffusion models, including Justin Husky and Jed, who aren't software engineers, spend a lot of time using AI just so we can grok it. We know what it does. We know what it doesn't do.
That's actually been one of the coolest things, is to see like Justin, who is by training a UX designer. Like that was his role at Infinite Red for a long time, was like doing designs for client projects. And he has a really good eye for UX, UI design, and like what a product needs, like features and things like that. And he was able to use Claude with basically no technical background and create a dashboard for something he needed internally, and give it exactly what he needed it to do, and iterate on it, and has a working product that meets his exact needs. And I think that's going to be one of the huge level ups that we see with agents. So that's been super fun.
Yeah, I agree with Robin. It's super interesting watching Justin do this, because he's a gifted designer. So he thinks he knows a lot about product. He just knows nothing about programming. And watching him use first Claude Cowork and then Claude Code, we even put him on the big plan because he was using so many tokens. So hey, Justin.
He jokes that now he doesn't need to work with developers, which is like the best thing that's ever happened to him.
Everything to do with software is going to become much more important for us senior software engineers, and The middle software engineers, that's something I don't have a prediction for. I'm not sure where that's going. I think the bottom, or the, not bottom, that's horrible. The less experienced software engineers, I think will do what I was describing before. And I think the very senior people will do the big stuff that requires a lot of experience. If you have 20 years experience making software that serves millions of people, that knowledge is incredibly useful, and it has nothing to do with writing code. And that's kind of where, since we're an entirely senior company, all of our people are seniors or much greater, we're going to be architecting the same big systems we always do, and we're just going to use agentic coding to do a lot of the coding. That being said, the middle, I don't have a prediction for. And to bring this all the way back to Justin, but Justin, who's a designer, I think is going to have even more. They're going to be even more important, because not only can they design stuff, they can prototype stuff themselves. Imagine the designers being able to hand you a vibe coded prototype. Not like you're just going to use that, obviously, especially if you're having 20 million active users a month or whatever. I think they're going to be more integrated in the entire software pipeline. And that being said, I think as seniors are also going to be more integrated too. Like a lot of kind of these separations between front end, back end, and the designer and not designer, and product management. And, I think a lot of that stuff's going to fade away more. I think anything that has to do with creating software and creating software systems to service high volume or high importance projects, I think everyone involved is going to be spread out more across anything that has to do with software.
Right. Yeah, we're all going to end up much more full stack, because we're not limited by like what we have the technical experience in terms of like language or like framework or whatever. Because like AIs are really good at learning a framework or like learning a language or something like that. But it will be much more about just, do you have technical expertise or not?
Yeah, and
can you like direct the AI to make hardy, scalable software?
I think scalable and hardy are the key points there. I've taught many people to program over my many years in this industry, and one of the things I always say is like, you can build a dog house for 2 dogs, let's say, or you can build a small tiny house for 2 humans, let's say, and then you can build a skyscraper for 10,000 humans. It is not simply a bigger tiny house. You know what I mean? Like the skills you had to make that tiny house are not what you need to make the skyscraper. That's not how it works.
Right, exactly.
And a lot of people you're sitting across, especially like clients and stuff, will have that in their mind. Like, well, I built this doghouse, so certainly building a skyscraper is just the same thing but more. And it's like, no, there's a huge amount of experience there.
Right.
And
so take with a grain of salt your buddy or your like CEO or something who has been like, oh, look what I built with Claude in 20 minutes. Like, you guys should be going like super fast, and we don't like need devs anymore. Like, that's like building the doghouse, and we still need all like the people with experience to build the skyscraper.
CEOs are stupid.
Yeah, they are.
Let's just admit it.
They're the worst.
No,
Why would anyone want to be a CEO?
They really are. Come on, let's be real. I've sat in a meeting with clients, 6,000 person company, and I've said I'd really like to talk to the people that's going to be using this software. The people on the front lines, and I was told not to talk to them, and that the executives and the CEO knew what was best. They have never actually used the software, never will use the software. So I've, being a good consultant, I listened, and I immediately went out and talked to the real people so they could have something that was actually useful. But anyways, I digress again.
So like, we're sort of on the precipice of what I think a lot of developers are feeling is going to be a big shift in how we work, which is understandably maybe causing some fear or stress or anxiety in developers who don't know what their job is going to look like in the next 5 years. Whether or not they're worried they'll have a job or not, or just like worried that they won't be doing the same thing that they got into the career path for. But you've been around for a long time, and I think you've lived through some of the major sort of shifts in software engineering over the decades, like the move to the internet. Maybe there were others, but I'm wondering if you could just like talk about what some of those huge shifts were like, and whether that helps you sort of not predict, but sort of be prepared for what's incoming with the AI revolution, and maybe make people feel a little less nervous.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So, first off, I would say that there's some things that are now just to what's happened in the past, and there's a lot of things that are not, and none of us really know. So, we're just predicting. I've always been fairly confident in some of my decisions. Well, a lot of my decisions. Robin might say all my decisions. But
Too confident.
You shut your mouth. But the reason I had that confidence is because I've just been doing it for so long, and I've been consultant. I worked at startups and that kind of stuff, but most of my career has been consultancy. And I've just been through it so often, and I could give you an analogy like, yeah, we did something very similar to this, and this is what happened, and here's my perspective. But a lot of this is so new and so different that I don't have that experience to rely on. So a lot of what I say is not necessarily what I want to happen. It's more what I predict is going to happen. So, for example, when I was talking about the junior devs doing smaller bespoke stuff for tons of different companies, I think that's pretty likely. Other things are way less so. For instance, when we went from client server, every app being a client server, a front end running on your desktop, talking to a database directly. Then we went into the internet and, all the different protocols for that and all the new languages and that kind of stuff. That was a huge change. And I have all that experience in my back pocket, and I can tell stories, and I can kind of make decisions based on how I saw that go. But this is different. Very rarely in programming do we get a situation where the computers are able to do something new that they could never do before. And in this case, specifically things that only humans could do. Like we had a limit. Software could do X, but it hit a wall and it couldn't do Y. Humans or something organic, I guess it didn't have to be humans. They tried to use pigeons to guide missiles in World War II by pecking on the ship.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I blame Jamin for that one. But there was a line that the computer simply couldn't do. We had algorithms, we had ways of doing it. Stuff like self-driving, like in the Tesla, up until a couple of years ago, was like 300 or 350,000 lines of C++ written by people or something. Now it's done using models, not code handwritten by people. So you could definitely do things that seemed like intelligence, but they were all hand-coded. It was incredibly slow, and there was limits, right? And we knew the things that computers couldn't do. But now we have computers can still do what the computers can do, but then we have models, which I don't really consider a computer. It runs on a computer, but I don't consider it a computer. Models can do all these new things that only humans can do. And to be honest, we don't even know what they can do because it's not really super deterministic. If I said, why does Microsoft Word do this? And it's been around for a very long time with tons of programmers. You theoretically could go find a programmer who did that exact thing, and they could tell you in great detail, or you could read the source code, and it could tell you in great detail exactly why, what all the rules were, and how that all works, right? But models aren't that way. We produce the model, and we're more scientists. We're like going into the model and discovering what it can do.
Right. You're like, okay, if I give this prompt to Sonnet, it gives me this output. Or like, I wasn't really happy with that. Let's give it to Opus and see what it does. Or like, let's go give it to Cursor or whatever. And you get a different thing every time. And like one of those 10 times that you try it, it might be like complete magic. And you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we create these patterns and we share it with each other. And we're like, oh, they can do this and stuff. So even if if Claude 4.6 or GPT 5.4 is the last models we ever create, we'd still spend a decade or decades exploring what they can do.
But they won't be the last models we create because look at what's happened between December and today.
I mean, so we don't know actually the extent of what our current models can do, and we wouldn't know for a very long time, and they're constantly changing. So a lot of the stuff I don't know the answer to. I do know using using things like Claude 4.6, which is pretty amazing compared to previous ones, and 5.4 is also really amazing codecs. But we do know at this point that there's a lot of stuff that humans are going to have to do at this point. Architecture, just the kind of experience thing that has nothing to do with code. And obviously, babysitting the agents and making sure they're producing good code and kind of guiding them through that. But
right.
But my whole point is we don't know where the lines are anymore, and no one knows. So the entire industry, and I talked to other people, other owners of companies like ours and that kind of stuff. Obviously, we're deep in the community. Everyone's trying to figure this out. And it's not just in the React community, the React Native community, or the mobile community. It's everywhere. Heck, our lawyer's trying to figure this out because
didn't our lawyer ask us to help him build something for?
Well, he's actually pretty good with using ChatGPT and stuff. And December, when the new model came out, Opus 4.5, I think it was,
which is kind of what we and a lot of people kind of view that as sort of a big turning point.
Yeah, a little
in what the models could do.
A little epoch there. He said it's him interacting with it from a law standpoint, it's got considerably better too. So they're having the exact same conversations in law, and I'm sure accounting and all that stuff. All those. We just don't know the limits. I do think there are some lines that currently the models can't get past. One is kind of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I think LLMs and a lot of the current transformer-based models and attention models, I think they're really good at imitating things. Act like a engineer and then do this thing and that thing. I think they're incredibly good at imitating. I haven't seen a lot of actual creativity, and maybe someone can show me.
They're good. Anything that seems like creativity is usually the model imitating.
Yeah,
imitating things that other people have created.
And I think they're like anti-AI slop, but it's not. Yeah, no one. Of course, if you just put in a prompt and you let it produce a 10-second video, that would be AI slop. But that's not the real concern. The real concern is, and I don't even know if concern is the right word, but the real concern from will my job exist is that you could take one movie editor. I don't know. It's not my profession. And with AI as a tool, they can do so much more work that you need a lot fewer movie editors. That's the real issue. It's not that humans won't be involved in the creativity part. Yeah. And the same with software. Like, you may not need a programmer as much, but you need someone who's deeply experienced in software. That could be a very experienced product manager. That could be a designer like Justin. But there is an art to creating software that can accomplish business goals in a creative way that does it better than their competitors, right? Because you have to remember that everything we do is a competition, like it or not. I like to say that the United States is a business, not a country, and I think that's pretty accurate. So everything's at some point it's a competition. So it doesn't matter if a programmer now could create what you could create 2 years ago in a day, and that took you 2 months. They're not competing against you 2 years ago. They're competing against you now. It's like when I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but it's like I guess that's the point of this, right? Is for me to ramble.
It is.
But hey, do you not understand what podcasts are?
We brought Todd on to ramble because I generally find his rambling pretty interesting. So.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. You're going to get your check this week.
Yes.
Well, I mean, if you behave. But let me rephrase it this way. If clients came to us and said, hey, why should we pay for you senior engineers with all your vast knowledge, like how I stuck an advertisement there. I'm no dummy.
Why should I pay your very, very expert consultants
with great ROI?
All of that is true, by the way.
But why would we pay for you super expensive, experienced developers when we could pay this much cheaper developer who's going to use agents and can do the same thing? And that's a great question. Here's the answer. That is not what's happening. You're not choosing between a medium developer with agents against experienced developers without agents. You're going to be choosing between a medium developer with agents and experienced developers who use the agents way better than the medium developer does. So
it's very true.
And that's because we're a competition. Like, it doesn't matter if you can do what you did 5 years ago. Like, you're going to be your competitors who hire us or CallStack or Software Mansion. I want to get paid for each one of those free advertisements I just did. Poland, listen up, send money my way. But if someone hires us with our expertise and our ability to use agents, and trust me, we working very hard to use agents as well as anyone. They're going to be comparing us using agents to some mediocre developer using agents. And even though that mediocre developer could produce something that was wonderful 5 years ago, it's not going to be wonderful compared to what we do. And now some programs like, I don't like, I'm just spec writing. I'm just this. I don't like working with agents. Well, yeah, I want a pony and a rainbow, and I want my own NBA team. Like,
I mean, weren't there programmers who hated being forced to like switch to working with IDEs and like other sorts of new tools when they came out?
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what we hate. We have to live in reality. And I'm not advocating for what I'm saying. I'm just simply predicting it. But yes, so in the old days, gather around, kids.
In the olden days.
Old man's going to yell at clouds and you're forced to watch. In this case, listen. So IDs were not universally beloved. Us developers who had spent our careers in editors and stuff, IDs came out with their automatic code generation and their wizards, and you'd get these programmers who knew nothing about code, and they would just use wizards. They couldn't even write a class without a wizard. This has happened before in this kind of stuff, and obviously those people can produce some cool stuff that they couldn't produce before, and they can do it really fast because the wizard just produces it. But ultimately, we didn't stick with that, and we actually, during the internet boom, went away from IDEs. Again, like, it was very IDE centric until the internet kind of stuff took off, and
it was the wild, wild west again.
Right, and we realized, like, not having ID, and like, for instance, I did a lot of Ruby, which great language, slow as hell, but great. And Ruby on Rails and that kind of stuff. And Ruby on Rails, Ruby people do not use IDEs. Never did. It was culturally just didn't happen. Ruby people didn't use debuggers either, to be honest.
Hey, you can pry my binding.pry out of my cold.
That's a good Rails reference. I like it. Some of you will understand that. The smart ones. So the point is, just to finish my thought. Because Ruby people they use editors, not IDs, Rails had to be designed in a way that was simple enough to hold in your brain. And it creates this need for these really cool, simple, elegant frameworks. When before that, when we were doing, let's say, something in .NET or say in a large Java enterprise system, because everyone used code generation, you would create a model that attached to your database, and it was 50,000 lines of code. You couldn't understand it. You had to use the IDE. Like, no one could understand the code. And then we flip back to, okay, well, this code has to be simple where you can read it as a human. You don't need a special tool, that kind of stuff. So the whole point of what I'm saying is these things do come along where less experienced people are able to be pretty productive in a way that they weren't before. But that runs into a wall, and that's fine. And so us kind of, more experienced developers simply move to more complex things. So hopefully, knock on this, whatever IKEA desk is made out of, children's dreams, I think I heard. But, hopefully that will hold and that will repeat itself. And what we'll end up doing is, we can do stuff faster, but it just means we do a whole Can I swear on this? No, I'm kidding. You run the company, you bastard. Oh, yeah, true.
Why not? You own it. Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest, there's the only thing more overrated than pregnancy is thinking you're going to be the boss and people will listen to you. Maybe I'll cut that one out. I'm going to edit this, damn it. Anyways.
So yeah, hopefully we're on the same like sine wave that is the software industry, and we're just like hitting a different, like we're swinging back in the direction that we've been here before, and we swung the other way, and now we're kind of swinging back this way. But we have like, I think we can still have faith that like we'll sort of work out the kinks and sort of standardize, and it'll still feel good to be a software engineer.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is people like us, Robin and I and our company and everyone listening, we're all working on this, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're good. We're the kind of people who, when something broke, we didn't know how to fix it. We took it apart, figured it out, tinkered with it.
So that's what we're doing with this.
Yeah, us kind of people always are super useful because we'll take what the computer, or in this case, the models can do, and we'll push it to a limit that normal people cannot. It's like AI art. I'm putting those quotation marks. Obviously, the average person now can create basic AI art. It looks pretty cool. It's pretty amazing and stuff, but it's obviously, at a particular level. But I give a real artist those exact same AI tools, and they can produce something that a normal person cannot. And so we learn to adapt, and we learn, okay, that's really easy to do. So it now has not a lot of value. But these artists come in, you could tell artists they could only use mud and sticks. And artists will come up with something out of mud and sticks that's insane, like amazing, because that's what they do. And so you give them the AI tools that you can create something that looks cool with, they're going to create something you can't create. And I think that same analogy applies to us. Like, yes, the average developer with agents will be able to do a whole lot more than they could. Almost what seems a scary amount of things. But we're going to be able to do things way more than that because this is our lives. We're soaking in this. We're seeped in it 8 hours, hopefully 8 hours a day or less. But let's pretend we're a startup and we're saving the world through dynamic API generation. You're going to spend 16 hours a day working on this stuff. And so you're going to get really good. That 16-hour days was a dig on it.
If you know, you know.
A dig on this.
On a certain CEO.
CEOs are stupid. Anyways, so I'm not going to predict that I'm optimistic. I don't feel optimistic or pessimistic.
Well, that was actually going to be my closing question, because we're getting to the end of time. But I was going to ask you, like, what's something that you're feeling particularly worried about, and then one thing that you're feeling particularly optimistic about with everything that's coming?
Something I'm optimistic about and something I'm pessimistic about. I am optimistic that us technical-minded, creative, experienced people in software are going to have a role, because the high rung always moves up, and we're the kind of people who are going to move up with it. I can't see that not happening. Pessimistic is that we'll be writing code at all. Actual code. I'm not taking architecture or designing software.
That we'll be writing specs.
Yeah, but
all day and letting the agents write the code all night.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, is there any reason, like, you might write the API of a class, you might write all the methods and the parameters, but is there even at this point any reason not to have the AI write the internal of that class or that method? I don't know.
I mean, probably not.
Yeah.
But if I know developers, they are absolutely obsessed with optimizing. And so I think developers will find a way to make their jobs fun and interesting, even as they sort of adapt to the new world order.
Yeah, I mean, in the late 80s...
They hate being unhappy.
Sorry, the late 90s, we did pure waterfall, which means there was an entire spec that you worked on for 125 hours. no code was created. It was just interviewing the client, coming in with every screen, and what every screen does, what every report does, every calculation on every screen, every calculation, every report was all done before anyone touched code. Was that a fun job? I did it. It was fine. I mean, I liked coding better, but this kind of just jumping into code every day and just pumping out code and kind of being, super flexible, that's more of a modern thing.
It is a modern thing.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the sort of move fast, break things ethos that sort of showed up.
Yeah, and so writing big specs like that wasn't great, but as a programmer, like you had the full spec, and it was nice to know exactly what it was supposed to do, and you could just, program. And it was kind of a lot less stress having waterfall like that.
So in a way, I feel like agents could unlock a more relaxed like lifestyle for developers, like because the AI is like churning through the code, and so you can really take your time with the specs and the planning and the architecture and not feel all this pressure to like get straight to the code, because you have to you're not going to have enough time if you spend like 2 days writing out a spec. You're like, no, I got to ship. But you can spend your whole day writing a spec and then let your agent work overnight, and then you've like satisfied the same thing.
Yeah, when I was creating the AAA title Flappy Todd,
Quadruple A.
Yeah, there was a quintuple A. I actually, other than doing graphic work, and I like to do graphics. I've done design before, but most of the time I spent was actually just tweaking the game to make it really fun and playable. Because Claude 4.6,
right, the human thing.
Yeah, Opus was doing the programming. Now I would check everything it did, and it did a great job. But I would just spend most of my time while it was doing the programming, tweaking constants and stuff,
right,
and making the game very fun and playable through as it got faster and faster, and you progress through the level.
Right, because really, that's really only something a human can check. Like only a human can tell you, is this fun?
Right. So that was actually really fun. Now, obviously, I like to program as well. That's fun also. But let me finish off this. Another really old timey story. My stepfather, Alan, who passed away like 12 years ago, he was a programmer, and he was a programmer in the 70s and 80s. I think some in the 60s. This is what they did. They got a particular project they're supposed to work on from their company. He worked for a security company. I forget the name of it. Doesn't matter. But they did like security systems on buildings and stuff. So they had all the software that handled that. Anyways, they would get a project. And the first thing they did is they would choose a server to run the project on. The server, the machine that you bought, like a digital PDP 7-year, I think that's what they're called. I'm probably wrong there. But anyways, it would come with its own programming language. That's how you bought it. You bought the machine and it came with a programming language. So the programmers would learn that programming language. There was no such thing as a database. They didn't exist. So the first so many months, they would develop the data store. And they would program that from scratch, every single project, in a language they just learned on a machine, maybe they used before, maybe they didn't. And then when I would tell him stories like how we did, because he stopped programming before, like maybe early 80s or something like that. He owned some businesses. But anyways, when I tell him what we do now, he's like, well, that's just, most of what we did, you guys don't even do anymore. And it's true. So all that stuff, all those skills they learned and how to, they're just completely unnecessary. And then when I started programming in the 90s, because we had databases and there was SQL, which was a standard, and there was, storing data store was not a big thing anymore. And so what I used to describe our programming was very foreign to him compared to what he thought of as programming. And then 2004, 2005, the internet's taken off, Google, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. The paradigm's changed. Web development is very different than what we did in the 90s with client server, very different. And a lot of people struggled to move up. And then we started getting into other things and mobile and all this stuff. Like, I don't think you should worry about programming changing. I think only thing we're worried about is programming not existing. And by say programming, let me rephrase that to creating software. Yeah. Software development, software engineering. It will be very different, but
But
it will.
But it's already different than it was 30 years ago.
Right. So I think it will totally exist. I mean, look at Star Trek. Obviously, it's a TV show, but you never saw like the engineers programming. They would work with the computer to solve the problems, and they would solve it in minutes. I know it's a TV show, where you used to would take months before. And I think that's ultimately. I think we're fine in that regard because we can outcompete people who don't have our experience, our gifts, or our talents, and that's valuable. I don't know.
I totally agree. I think we're going to adapt, and it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, we're working this nonstop. We're working on this problem. Like, where are we going?
Is. I feel like this is literally what everyone is thinking about and talking about and working on.
Yeah, and I'd like to
all the time now.
I'd like to come back if Robin allows me and just have more discussions on this because I think a lot of us are really, really worried about, our careers and where it's going and stuff.
This will not be the last you hear about AI on React Native Radio.
Yeah,
we will come back to React Native. I promise.
Of course.
But definitely not the last you'll hear.
I will say that mobile's got a little bit more of a moat than web. Like a lot of the AI tools are really good at web. Mobile's a little more difficult. So that gives us
all the more reason to hire Infinite Red to build your mobile app with React Native.
Have we told you about our company?
We told you about our company.
Oh my God, we're obnoxious. How do you stand that same ad every single episode?
Hey, speak for yourself, man. Everyone loves me.
Oh, trust me. Many people told me I'm obnoxious. So.
I'm gonna cut Todd off because I don't think our listeners want to listen more than an hour. And if you're still here, thank you so much. I'm going to reward you with a joke. Has anyone seen the IT guy?
No.
Oh, he probably ran somewhere.
Oh, Jesus. So bad.
It's so bad. It's good. Thank you, Todd, for coming on. This was a really, really fun look into the past and into the present and to the future. I look forward to hearing your voice on the podcast more often.
Yeah, it was fun. And hopefully you all liked that. If you didn't, don't tell me because I'll cry. I'm a very sensitive person.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
As always, thanks to our editor, Todd Werth, our assistant editor, Jed Bartosky, our marketing and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Mazen Chami. Our producers and hosts are Jamin Holmgren, Robin Hines, and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/radio. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio on all the major podcasting platforms.